Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rosalía TV, El Mundo de Pilar Aymara, and today with our guest, Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh. Hello, Tasmina.
Hello, Pilar. Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to see you.
Tasmina is the Alba Party candidate in Central Scotland. And the first thing I want to ask is, because the Alba Party just launched the manifesto. So tell us about the manifesto and how things are going for you in the campaign.
Well, we are 4 weeks old today, Pilar. So it's amazing, given that we are just 4 weeks old, just how far we've come, with over 5,000 members, more than the Liberal Democrats, 32 excellent candidates in place. Our party election broadcasts have aired and have gone down extremely well in terms of our messaging. I've been campaigning today, let me see, about 6-7 hours, 13,000 steps in 8.5 kilometers with activists. So, you know, it's been a really amazing 4 weeks and really enjoyable, I think, for everybody involved in the campaign, because I think, Pilar, most people felt that it was going to be, everybody anticipated what the result was likely to be. So it was all very boring. Mm-hmm. But it also meant there was a bit of antipathy in terms of the election. You know, people were wondering whether to bother to vote, given that it seemed like a done deal what the result might be and if there was anything worth voting for. So I'd like to think that Alba has injected some action into this campaign. I think of that, there is no doubt. I don't think our fiercest of opponents, and we have lots of opponents, would even suggest that we haven't injected some interest into the debate. So 4 weeks on, we've come a long way. Our manifesto, as you mentioned, was just launched a couple of days ago. You know, Pilar, it's really very much a group effort. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to Alex, as leader of the party, that policies weren't imposed upon our candidates, but they were part of the process. And of course, we're very lucky because we have such a range of expertise and skills amongst our candidates that it made perfect sense to draw in those skills and task a number of our candidates with leading on papers, and on top of that, have a number of excellent professionals and professors and lecturers and people who are experts in their field independently advising us on our manifesto. Professor Lindsay Patterson, Professor Sir Harry Burns. So we've got education and health, two big policies. And, we've had just so many people who've been involved in it. So I think we've come up with a really innovative manifesto, which is a festival of ideas. I think that it seems to many that the campaign was void of ideas. I know people have rolled out their manifestos and it just seems like lots of numbers and much of the same. We wanted to bring some ideas to the fore. I think that's where the void has been, and I hope we've managed to fill that.
Tasmina, the Alba Party talks about the urgency for independence and proposes joining EFTA. What is a realistic timetable for achieving these objectives?
You know, Pilar, you ask the €1 million question, to which none of us can have the answer. I suppose the best way to answer it, if I may, is this. Many of us yearn for EU membership. We want our, I'm an EU citizen. I feel like I am still, and I don't want to be stripped of that citizenship. But the harsh reality is that, notwithstanding the campaign that the SNP ran in 2019, that Christmas election with the big buses that said, "Stop Brexit," they have been unable to stop Brexit. Brexit is a reality facing everybody every day now and having an impact on people's daily lives. So we have to try and find a quick way out of that scenario. Hence, we don't think independence can wait. And independence itself is inextricably linked to our ability to re-enter the European Economic Area, because without that, we have no locus to do so. Unfortunately, we were unable to get any kind of a deal. Northern Ireland is still better off in terms of what they've been able to negotiate, but not so Scotland. And that's a loss, and questions should be asked about why we were unable to secure anything at all for Scotland. All of that being said, we have to look to the future and how quickly we can get ourselves back into that trading bloc, or a trading bloc. It's simply because our businesses can't wait any longer, our fishermen, farmers, across all industries. and above all, those who are facing poverty and inequality because of lack of jobs and opportunities that have arisen as a direct result of the consequences of Brexit and indeed the pandemic. Therefore, we have to look constructively and cleverly at how we can advance the Scottish case on a European perspective. And it seems to us, after much debate, that, seeking to join, first of all, we have to secure independence, Pilar, let's be absolutely frank. We cannot do any of the things that we want to do that our country needs for us to do to make it better until we achieve that aim of independence. That is why, on day one, we believe negotiations should start with Westminster. 3 weeks from now, we intend to lay down a motion in Parliament to advance all of these negotiations. So no time to waste at all. Once that starts, once you start negotiating and you're serious about your independence because you have a mandate from the people of Scotland to deliver on independence, that then opens the doors to widening conversations with our European friends, of which we have many, and diplomatic relations, and making sure we use all of our contacts and enter into that very debate from a serious perspective, not just at some point in the future, perhaps in 3 years we might have a referendum, but the here and now. And we think, after much debate, that the most likely avenue for us to gain access as quickly as possible is through the EFTA EEA route. And following on from that, if the people of Scotland require, then of course full European Union membership. But time is of the essence, Pilar. When a manifesto entitled "Shake It Up," not named after me as a shake, nothing to do with me, it has been suggested, nothing to do with me. But it's been, that is because the urgency and the imperative is there. And therefore, these two things have to run concurrently. We need to be negotiating our European position and independence at the same time. And that's what we hope to do. And ultimately, it should be up to the people of Scotland to decide, I believe, in a referendum, whether they want to be back full-time in the European Union.
Tasmina, the appearance of Alba Party has been a revolution, but let's talk about women, because your party organized the largest women's conference in Scotland in years. The last one, if I recall correctly, was organized by Women for India in 2018 in Paisley. So what is it that attracts so many women to Alba?
So I've got a long history of women inequalities in the SNP. I was the first national women's convener and first national equalities convener way back in 2011. And I instigated in 2012 the first ever SNP Women's Conference. And that was such an energizing, enlightening experience. God, Pilar, we miss this as women. The energy in the room from women is always great. And to be able to discuss things in a safe environment is hugely important. It was then and even more so now, but every year since 2012, as long as I was women's convener, we had a women's conference. I have to say, because it is a matter of fact, since I've left that post, there has not been another SNP women's conference, certainly not at that scale that I used to have, and there hasn't been another SNP equalities conference. And again, I instigated the Equalities Conference, Pilar, because that brought in our LGBT communities, our BME communities, and our disabled communities, to discuss matters of relevance to them. So you asked the question about Alba and our conference we had. So when we launched the party, one of the first things I said was, before the election, I want to ensure we have a women's conference and women's voices are heard, because in the last couple of years, the debate around women and women's rights has become a very nasty place for women to be. And I simply couldn't fathom or understand why that was the case. When we're 52% of the population, why do we feel that for some reason we can't speak our minds about issues that are important to us, even just to discuss them, whilst we formulate our opinions? So I wanted to create this space, an atmosphere to do so, which is what we did 3 weeks ago now. Hugely successful. Over 400 women were online and discussing things that were really important to them, and various issues, as you know, that have unfortunately, and it's a failing, I would say, of the Scottish Parliament, and indeed Scotland and those involved in the debate as a whole, to be unable to navigate our way through discussions around gender recognition and trans rights, and why it seems that trans rights were being pitted against women's rights. That should never be the case. Everybody is equal. In terms of the law, we are equal. And it's up to all of us to ensure that people feel safe as they marshal their arguments in relation to what they feel about these issues and how best to approach them. So, you know, women are, I mean, I have to say, unashamedly, I think this is the strongest manifesto for women out of all of the parties' manifesto, because we fundamentally enforce the fact that we will stand behind and protect women's sex-based rights, as women are entitled to have protected in terms of the Equality Act 2010. But what we've seen over the past year and more or so, as things have been debated in Parliament, then put on the back burner, is that people who've attended events have lost their jobs. People who are in academia have lost their jobs because they dared to speak out. What kind of Scotland have we become? So we need to adjust ourselves, recast that debate in a positive fashion, which is why our manifesto espouses to protect the rights of all groups, which absolutely should be the case, but not at the cost of any other, certainly not at the cost of women, and that we should have a citizens' assembly to discuss the issue, you know, of gender recognition and have informed discussion and debate in a respectful environment. I mean, Pilar, after that conference a few weeks ago, you know, women involved in that were at the end of threats of violence, physical violence.
I know.
For speaking our minds in what was supposed to be a safe environment. Now, as long as I have life in my blood, and I'm a mother of 3 girls and a boy, as long as I have life in me, in my veins, I will fight for women's rights and women's ability to talk about things in safe spaces. They are our spaces. And I've seen online this week, Pilar, I mean, just for your viewers, let me just say this. I've seen online this week threats from someone suggesting that in the final week of the election campaign, they're going to play out or broadcast the discussion we had in that single-sex safe space. That is what we are facing, and that cannot be tolerated. So I hope in advance of the election, COVID regulations allowing, to have a gathering of women. I'm just going to leave that there for Pilar as your exclusive. That is my aim and ambition, so we can feel at a distance a sense of one another, a sense of solidarity, because this pandemic has demonstrated that we need each other. We yearn for each other's company. We need to make sure that we're able to deliver on that.
As an observer of the Scottish politics, I have to say that I'm just shocked with the lack of respect in the debate and the lack of debate. And I've been reporting on many women's events, and I'm struggling to understand why your events, this event, especially this event, had so little coverage. So it seems that it's as if there is an intentional attempt by the mainstream media, especially by the BBC, to black out and censor the Alba party. And I know that today was an emergency Ofcom election committee hearing. That's right, yes. Do you know what the result of that was?
Not yet. We don't have a result as of yet, Pilar, but you know, our friends in this new media community will be the very first to know as soon as we talk about that. I mean, one thing I should mention, and you rightly mentioned about, well, this is an attempt to shut down women's voices in Alba. It will not be successful because we won't be silenced. And women who want to stand up for their sex-based rights will not be silenced. So these attempts are going to fail. It's much better that people try and embrace a discussion as opposed to try and shut it down. It's an unimaginable situation. And, you know, my daughters look on and wonder what on earth has happened, that these discussions have now become so toxic. And you mentioned the BBC. Philip Sim put out a piece a couple of weeks ago about all of the women candidates in the election. And for some reason, Alba women, all 18 of us, majority women candidates in terms of our party in this election, were not mentioned. So the question has to be asked, why not? Don't we matter? Don't we qualify? Are we not intelligent enough? Are we not the right kind of women? But it's quite incredible, Pilar. If you look at the breadth of talent in amongst the women, in fact, all of our parties, but given that we're talking on the subject of women, women who've been fighting for women's rights for 40 years, marching for gay rights for 40 years when it was dangerous and uncomfortable to do so. Women from all areas of life, farming, law, corporate world, scientists. Why do we not matter? Our party wasn't even mentioned, nor our number, nor even our names. Notwithstanding, Pilar, as I said, we shan't be silenced. And sometimes those who attempt to silence us will find that that's going to boomerang back on them extremely quickly.
Well, can I recommend my followers this book? Okay. It's 2014 all over again. Remember that. Tasmina, another question is because I saw that Nicola Sturgeon has said that she won't work with Alex Salmond. I just was surprised to hear that. Do you think that position is at all sustainable?
Well, first of all, Pilar, if it is our view as elected representatives, or even those who hold positions of authority or influence in Scottish society, I don't think it's the right approach to suggest you won't work with people who've been elected by the people of Scotland, because you are required to do so by virtue of the fact that they have a mandate to be there. You know, I mean, we all support independence. Our national cause should be above everything else, because the people of Scotland who are suffering because we are unable to deliver, because we don't have all of the powers at our disposal, what they need to have a better life, would look on in absolute anguish if they were to think that people wouldn't work together to achieve for those very people who've elected us. So, you know, Pilar, those who know me know I'm a ball of, what should we say, enthusiasm, positivity. And I refuse, and my party, my colleagues refuse to be dragged down by negativity. And it's never been the case, Pilar, that in any campaign I've been involved with, that negativity has come from both sides. You've got the unionist argument, and they have their own reasons for being supportive of the union and their policies within it, and they're entitled to have that view. But then we have our same side of the argument that seems to be suggesting that for some reason we don't have a valid place. Why not? The latest panel-based poll, in terms of that, I think almost 90% of SNP voters saw absolutely the Alba party should be standing. And, if we want to embrace Europe, if we want to be a Scotland within the European Union in our own right as an independent nation, we should look to Europe, who have list parties with a multitude of different parties standing. This idea that the independents is a preserve of the SNP, or now the SNP and the Greens, because it seems to me, Pilar, even off the back of a hustings I was in last night, there seems to be some kind of unwritten coalition going on between the SNP and the Greens. And you have to ask the question, those viewers who watched Question Time would wonder, if you had the opportunity to have another strong, independent supporting voice there, like the leader of our party, Alex Salmond, on that panel with Keith Brown and Lorna Slater against the unionists, why wouldn't you do it? Why would you deprive Scotland of that voice? Why would you allow the people of the United Kingdom who are viewing this programme to think that our arguments are weaker because we're overpowered by the numbers of the other people in the debate? It simply beggars belief. The actual fact is we're going to be positive because the people of Scotland require for us to be so. We'll take our direction from them. We'll take our instructions from them. And I think it's incumbent on anyone in the Parliament to work with the elected representatives who've been put there by the people of Scotland. And to answer your question directly, I don't think it's sustainable to say that you won't work with people in Parliament, because we've seen that the SNP have worked with other political parties of a different persuasion in terms of the nationalist unionist debate in Parliament. So why would you not work with your colleagues? Because there cannot be a nobler cause or more necessary or imperative cause than that of independence, and that should overcome all else.
can I say that I remember the representative of UKIP, the candidate of UKIP, debating with no representation whatsoever. So it's kind of...
I'm going to say his name correctly, although in the European campaign, David Coburn, the candidate for UKIP, decided throughout the European campaign, because he was also a candidate, to call me by the wrong name quite deliberately. I was Jasmine, Jasmina, Tam. And that was just a sign of his, it was deliberate, of course it was, just a sign of his lack of respect. Yet, somebody who conducts themselves in a public arena in that manner and says such unquestionably offensive things, being allowed to debate in that arena, yet us positively contributing to Scottish society don't have the support of our colleagues, is an unsustainable position, and one that will have to be explained not by us to people, but by others to people as to why they're so against our participation in these debates. And the BBC will have to answer to why in 2016 David Coburn was hardly polling on anything and didn't have MPs at Westminster or councillors like we have, was able to be in a debate.
Tasmina, last question, because it is often thrown in your face that you have been with the Tories, with Labour, with SNP. Can you tell us a bit about your personal political evolution and why you are now with Alba?
So I was born into a Tory household. Like, my 4 kids are nationalists because since they were born, that's all they heard mum and dad speaking about the SNP, about Alex Salmond, about Nicola Sturgeon, about the cause of independence. So in similar vein, I was born into a Tory household. My father was the first Asian regional councillor from the United Kingdom to be elected, and he was very proud of that in Edinburgh Central way back in the 80s. So obviously I campaigned for him. I campaigned when he stood to be a member of Parliament, etc. So I was brought up a Tory. I was in the Young Conservatives, and I stood for election for the Conservatives in 1999. And then in 2000, during that campaign, Pilar, in the 1999 campaign in Govan, I was actually, one of my opponents was Nicola Sturgeon, the other was Gordon Jackson. I still managed to poll, a few thousand votes, despite the intense opposition. However, I had shifted after marriage from Edinburgh and a very sort of cosy background to Glasgow, which is where I married and I still live today, and campaigning in a constituency that opened my eyes to what life was like for more people than I had been exposed to in my rather comfortable life that I'd grown up in. And that started to develop my view on where I came from wasn't actually representative of what the majority of people were facing. So it was knocking those doors in Govan that changed my mind and drew me to independence. You asked the question about Labour. When I was married in 1991, in the early 90s, I was living in an extended household. I joined my father-in-law, my mother-in-law and their family, my husband's 5 brothers and sisters in their house in Glasgow. And I was living in that environment. They were all staunch Labour supporters and close relatives of Mr. Sarwar. And I was asked by my father-in-law in the early 90s, before I stood in the Tory campaign in 1999, I should add, regardless of what Wikipedia says, because nobody asked me the question you kindly have. I was asked by my father-in-law to attend a Labour Party meeting in the early 90s, at which Mr. Sarwar was standing for something and needed the extended family support, my husband's family support. And so I went to that meeting because I was asked to do so by my father-in-law. And living in that extended household as a very young married woman, I was married at 19, I felt that was something that I had to and was obliged to do. Attending that meeting and voting in that meeting was the sum total of my involvement in the Labour Party. And anyone that says anything else is simply not being honest about it. And that was it. So people throw that in my face. I just let it pass me by because, life is too short. I lost my father-in-law to COVID, and these are not discussions that people even deserve to have with me because they've decided to reach their own conclusions without giving me the respect like you have today, thank you, of asking me the question. So I've been a nationalist, a proud supporter of Scottish independence for 21 years. And I think I've served my time and demonstrated my commitment to the cause. My movement from SNP to Alba is not a movement from the nationalist cause. It's absolutely a movement to push the nationalist cause to where it needs to be, because there needs to be some recalibration, in my view, in the SNP relative to the independence debate. I strongly believe that Nicola Sturgeon should continue to be First Minister for Scotland. We are advocating that people should vote, even those who are disillusioned and who weren't going to vote and are now going to vote, because we are encouraging them to do so, to vote for our SNP candidates on the constituency. Many PLR who are my former colleagues, who I had the greatest respect for and I like very, very much indeed, and I want to see elected. But that's not enough, because the votes on the list are wasted votes. It doesn't matter how anyone dresses them up. Because the SNP are polling so well, they will win, should win all of the constituency seats, and therefore we need to increase our representation in Parliament, work as colleagues with them, and that's why I'm encouraging people to vote. In Central Scotland, my final point on this question, 130,000 people, PLR, voted for the SNP in 2016, and not a single SNP MSP was elected. And all I'm saying to people is, give me the opportunity by lending me your list vote for the Alba party, and trust in what I did as an SNP MP and my record in standing up for independence and standing up against the bullies at Westminster. Trust me that I will use that vote and that seat to advance the cause of independence in our nation's Parliament.
Can I say that I remember my first interview with you, Tasmina? It was a very rainy day here in Santiago. It was very dark, but Tasmina was shining. It was smiling. And that was the beautiful thing of this day, apart from his kindness, and it was fantastic meeting you that time. Thank you very, very much for your time. I know you're working non-stop. I wish you all the very best, Tasmina, because you deserve it.
Thank you, Pilar, and thank you for your warmth, your generosity and your kindness. It's so lovely to speak to women on these terms of just base honesty. It just feels really nice, and thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to do so. Take good care.
Thank you all. See you.